Happy 4th of July Friday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in for a look at your extended forecast. Have a little bit to talk about, and obviously it's a big weekend here, not only in Central Georgia, but across the country. Probably the weekend that most people in the country are going to be outside. So of course the weather forecast is going to be very, very important. So we'll talk about what your forecast entails, what could change as we head into the end of the weekend, and a look at your extended forecast, something we haven't talked too much about because you're probably only caring what the weather's looking like through the end of the weekend. So we'll go ahead and take it over to our first graphic here in just 1 second. This graphic has to play out about 10 seconds. There we go. First things first, let's talk about our tropics outlook. So this area that we've been monitoring for potential development, number one, the chances have grown for potential development. This is as of the 8 a.m. update. Right now we're continuing to get 4 updates a day on this area of interest. So 2 a.m., 8 a.m., 2 p.m., and then 8 p.m. And then if this is to organize into a named storm, we'll get updates more frequently. But a 60% chance of developing over the next 2 days, along with a 60% chance of developing over the next 7 days. And you can already start to see some organization on the satellite imagery, some of that deep convection popping up over in the western Atlantic Ocean, off the coast of Florida. And over here, you can see all of these clouds spanning behind the boxes over there to the top right of the banner. That's actually going to be kind of what's left of our frontal boundary that finally moved through. It's not present here in the southeast anymore. It did dissipate. It's disorganized now. But those conditions of the frontal boundary did allow for some organization with this tropical system, but it's still well offshore, and this highlighted area in orange right now is mainly for the Georgia and the South Carolina coast. As you can see, it's slimmed down a lot in terms of the shaded area, which once extended back over into the northeast Gulf. So it doesn't quite look like this shaded area maybe goes into central Georgia. However, it could move onshore into areas of coastal Carolina over the next couple of days, whether that's South Carolina, whether that's North Carolina. Still a little bit up for debate, but this is looking increasingly likely that it will be our third named storm of the 2025 hurricane season, which we will go over the list of names at the end of this forecast. But first things first, let's start out with future view, see how it looks today, tomorrow, and for your Sunday in terms of rain chances. Looking like very scattered showers, maybe the potential for a storm or two throughout this afternoon into the evening hours, although those chances are still going to be very slim. Just like what we saw on Thursday, we did see some isolated thunderstorms, although they didn't really impact many areas. Most areas are going to remain dry for your 4th of July forecast. And the good news is, this is 8 p.m. right here on Future View. Take a look at what happens when most of those showers and maybe low-end thunderstorms, they start to weaken in nature, and we should get led into a completely dry night here for fireworks forecast, which we'll talk about a little bit more in some detail coming up in just a minute. Now we go into your Saturday morning, 8 a.m. right now. Some gusty winds propelling down from the north and the northeast. It looks like a dry start to your Saturday morning. Saturday afternoon, still predominantly dry, but those wind arrows getting a little bit longer, starting to turn yellow in color, which can indicate some gustier winds. And that's all going to be associated with the wind field of this potential tropical disturbance. You can see the wind arrows are moving a lot quicker off the Atlantic coast of Georgia and South Carolina, closer to where that center of circulation tries to organize. But along with that, there is a moisture field associated with these potential tropical disturbances. And you can see they're sprouting a couple of showers, maybe even a storm or two, farther to the southeast of central Georgia, but a couple of those could try to clip our south and southeasternmost counties. That goes into Saturday at 8 p.m. and then we fast forward to your Sunday morning, where that center of circulation is pretty well defined on the graph model. You can pick it out right here, just southeast of Columbia. There's its fair share of heavy rainfall, obviously some lightning, your gusty winds, really close to that center of circulation, but it looks like it's mainly going to move onshore in South Carolina, move inland in South Carolina, and then it's going to take another detour and probably move back out to the north and the northeast. But back here at home, it doesn't quite look like the moisture necessarily reaches here in central Georgia. We still have a couple of slim rain chances for Sunday, but overall it should be a mostly dry weekend for many folks. Just want to prepare you for what you could see in the way of rain or a shower or a storm. So your 4th of July weekend forecast still remains the same. I kept the 20% on each and every day for the rain chances, and that's just for a stray shower or a stray storm. Not looking at any severe criteria, maybe just more of your typical run-of-the-mill summertime thunderstorms. Some pockets of heavy rain, some frequent lightning, things get a little bit gusty, but most of these will be very short-lived and very brief as opposed to having widespread long-term impacts. So 94 for a high temperature on Friday, down to 92 on Saturday, and I put that windy note right there just because we're going to be close to the wind field of that center of circulation. And then 90 for a high temperature on Sunday, so we see a temperature decrease over the course of your holiday weekend, which will be very beneficial. Anytime we get a decrease in the temperatures, of course, a lot of times they do feel warmer during the summertime months. It's all going to be dependent on that humidity, which we'll nail down in this forecast as well. But if we get a decrease in the temperatures, that still does provide for some relief. Even if we have really swampy humidity, it will lower those feels-like numbers. So let's look at your future view wind gusts. This afternoon into Friday afternoon, we are looking at our fair share of a steady breeze. Gusts up to 15 to 20 miles per hour could be possible. If you do catch one of those isolated showers or storms, gustier winds could be present in very localized areas, as you can see hinted at by some shades of red, some shades of yellow just between Macon and Cordele right here on the map. Then we go into your Saturday afternoon. Closer to the coast, the winds are going to be gustier, where you're closer to that center of circulation right there offshore. Gusty winds up to 20, 25 miles per hour could be possible at some times. Just going to be a bit of a breezy Saturday afternoon. But if it's paired up with some drier air, that's going to feel very good because it's going to be a hot forecast no matter what. If we can get a breeze blowing some drier air around, could act as some relief for any outdoor activities that you have on your Saturday. But then we mentioned the humidity. The good news is the very swampy air that we've had all Friday morning is expected to recede back over closer to the coast. Some patchy areas of that dark green still remain, but predominantly light green is what you can find in the state of Georgia. Each time we go into the overnight hours, we'll look at an increase in that humidity, but there is a dry slot of air that you can see trying to move down from the north and the northeast. By the time we get into late Saturday evening, into the nighttime hours more so, not really going to have many implications on our forecast, but that would be some very dry air and it would really feel a lot more bearable outside. And then we go all the way into your Sunday evening, Sunday nighttime more so around 10 p.m. Dew point temperatures predominantly in the 60s. Overall, just showing you this to tell you that there is a more tolerable humidity that is going to be widespread, but some patchy areas are still going to have that swampy and sticky air that you can wear in some select locations. So those select locations that still have more moisture than others are going to have feels like numbers that are above the values that you do see. Most areas probably feels like temperatures in the mid 90s, the upper 90s, I wouldn't throw that out of the window as well. And a couple areas even getting to the triple-digit mark, which unfortunately doesn't feel the best, but it's 4th of July weekend with predominantly dry weather. Hopefully many of you are finding a pool, finding a lake, some body of water in order to cool yourself down when outside. How about some low 90s as we go into Saturday afternoon? That would feel a lot better than the upper 90s near the triple digits. And virtually the same story heading into your Sunday afternoon. Again, some isolated spots are going to feel warmer than those temperatures. Some isolated spots probably going to feel cooler than those temperatures, but that's what's going to be kind of more widespread over the course of the holiday weekend. So I was telling you about your fireworks forecast for your Friday night. It is still looking good. And if you continue fireworks into Saturday, maybe into Sunday, don't know the laws and the restrictions on that, but if you do have plans to shoot off fireworks after the 4th of July, most of the evening time and the nighttime each and every day does look very conducive for those fireworks. I would say if you're planning on starting to shoot them off at 6 p.m., which hopefully you're not going to do, we're still ways away from sunset at that hour, but that's where we're still going to have warmer temperatures in the 90s, and that can contribute to a pop-up shower or a pop-up storm. But as the temperatures cool, the rain chances lessen as well. 8 p.m., just some partially clear skies heading into sunset. 10 p.m., partially clear skies that are going to be dark, of course, so you're probably not going to get a glimpse of a lot of that cloud cover, but maybe with a lot of fireworks illuminating the night sky, you'll get a glimpse of some partly clear skies. But still, temperatures will be cooling down and the rain chances decrease every night that we do head into that cooler portion of the day. The Macon-Bacon are also in town for your 4th of July Friday, squaring off against the Florence Flamingos. Going to be hot at the chance going to be hot at the arrival and still the chance of seeing a shower or a storm. But once again, a greater likelihood that you don't see rain as opposed to receiving any of that rain. Still hovering somewhere in the low 90s by the time you get to first pitch at 7 p.m. And then as you're getting into the closing innings, temperatures cooling down, rain chances decreasing, and at the end of the game, the Macon Bacon will have a spectacular fireworks show over at Luther Williams Field. So make sure that you're staying until the end of the game, until the Bacon get that save and close out the game and get a 4th of July W on the schedule. Here's a look at your pool forecast. I know a lot of you are going to want to see this for this weekend. Still the chance of a shower or a storm each and every day, but they are very slim. Go ahead and keep all of your outdoor plans, not telling you these rain chances and talking about the pop-up shower or storm chance to make you afraid of anything that could be in the way of rain. Just trying to prepare you and trying to issue that you have a good likelihood of not seeing any of this rain whatsoever. High temperatures hovering from 90 to 94 degrees, closer to 90 towards the end of the weekend and closer to that 94-degree mark for the beginning of the weekend. Feels like numbers could climb to 100 in some spots. And note the winds out of the northeast, 15 to 20 miles per hour, specifically on Saturday afternoon. But it is a big weekend for the Grillcast, and I am happy to report that I think it's going to be green spatulas each and every day. 4th of July Friday, July 5th, and getting on into July 6th. Express caution if you see some dark clouds off in the distance, but overall no one's going to see, or most people aren't going to deal with any of those dark clouds. So your 4th of July travel forecast. We were talking about some heavy traffic yesterday. Lots of folks heading out of town after getting off of work. Now today for the 4th of July is expected to be the lightest traffic day of the entire week. And then we'll see an uptick in that travel forecast as we go into Saturday, Sunday, on into Monday. Specifically, Sunday is going to be a very heavy day on the roads with a lot of volume, just with plenty of cars backing up some roads. Mainly the interstates is where you're going to find a lot of this traffic. If you travel on back roads, less likely to deal with the congestion. But that congestion time frame looking to be the late afternoon into the evening hours on Sunday. Obviously, many people coming from far away. The roads will get more crowded as you get later in the day. People start to travel to some of those main highways. And still our fair share of increased traffic on Monday. So if you're planning on heading back to work on Monday, or really the evening commute time frame on Monday, 3 to 7 p.m. is when we're looking at some increased congestion. So my recommended weekend attire for today, looking like t-shirts, shorts, swim trunks, sunglasses, but don't forget that sunscreen, don't forget that water bottle. Stay hydrated. It is still going to be a hot weekend, even though the values aren't as high as we've seen in recent weeks. Be sure you're taking care of your body, keeping your body cool, and head indoors when you get really, really hot. Maybe start to feel lightheaded, start to sweat a lot. It's very important that you try to avoid any of those heat-related illnesses because that would sure put a damper on any outdoor activities or celebrations that you have this weekend. So let's pick it up with the long-range models. Let's go into Monday afternoon and all the way through the first part of the midweek next week. You can see scattered showers according to some models here in the south and the southeast. It's all going to be dependent on how much moisture we're left after that tropical system does move off up into the northeast. Tuesday at 6 p.m., still some blobs of green, some blobs of blue, all in the near vicinity of us. And each afternoon and evening, especially heading into the nighttime hours, is when we see better coverage of rain. But nothing definitive and nothing looking very organized in nature. So probably just our typical run-of-the-mill pop-up showers and storms each and every afternoon. Looks like we'll get a rebound in that humidity by the time we head into Thursday and on into Friday next week. And some of the temperatures are going to hover above average, which you'll get a glimpse of here on those 8 to 14 day temperature outlooks. Morning lows, not much change in them. Maybe a little bit cooler to start out Monday as compared to Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but overall still pretty close to average each and every morning. Just going to start out somewhere in the 70s. We haven't seen much fluctuation with those morning low temperatures. The afternoon highs are going to be what you want to know probably more. How is it going to feel as you're heading out the door from work, have any afternoon plans to maybe go visit the pool and such, and still these high temperatures not varying much, somewhere just slightly above average. So they are a little bit higher than the high temperatures we've had recently, but those will get knocked down if the rain chances are going to be fairly widespread. But in fact, we have not found ourselves hitting the 100-degree mark so far in the year of 2025. We got really close about a week ago. The highest temperature we have recorded was about a week ago when we got in those heat advisories. I think it was last Wednesday, I do believe, if I'm correct. But the average first 100-degree day is going to fall on July 2nd, which is past right now. July 2nd was this past Wednesday. So if we are to hit the 100-degree mark in the near future, going to trend a little bit later than average. We didn't even get close to it at the end of May, which very thankfully we didn't. But the latest time we've hit 100 degrees all time, September 18th. It is only the 4th of July right now, so we still have another month or two of summer really left to go, and that could even extend a little bit farther, as we know Central Georgia is still pretty hot by the time we get to September. It's once you get to October that you finally start to feel some of that cooler weather. So let's take a look at your temperature outlook 8 to 14 days in advance. So this is going to start on July 11th, go all the way to July 17th, really getting into the middle portion of July with this outlook. Above normal probabilities all over the southeast of seeing above average temperatures. The probability is a little bit greater down to the south and southeast of us, but we still find ourselves 2 boxes over to the right of normal. So it's better than a slim chance of at least seeing above average temperatures. And above average temperatures this time of year are going to be your mid and your upper 90s. Could even be more so your upper 90s, depending on how high that average temperature does climb by the time we get to this time period. So you should expect your fair share of days forecasted somewhere in the mid and the upper 90s in the near future. In terms of the precipitation, looking about the same as it has as of recent weeks when we've looked at this outlook. Just 1 box over to the right of normal, down in areas like Florida, near normal in terms of the precipitation. So that just probably means that we'll have our fair share of typical pop-up summertime showers and storms. However, down to the south a little bit, maybe more of a typical summertime forecast. We could continue to see an uptick in those precipitation chances, about 30 or 40% in terms of coverage each and every day. And that's kind of been the normal as of recently. So looking ahead, what do we have to look forward to? Obviously, plenty to look forward to with this weekend on tap, 4th of July weekend. Make sure that you're staying safe, taking care of your body in the hot weather, and of course with things like fireworks, but be sure to enjoy yourself. It's been an eventful first half of the year of 2025 so far. You all definitely deserve a much needed break. Back to school, hate to throw that on your radar already, and especially putting a 7 in front of this box right here. But July 30th will be when our first schools are heading back. That is Houston County and Peach County. And now, myself as a Houston County kid, I've gone back to school at the end of July, so I know it is very, very unfortunate. It feels wrong to go back to school in July. But of course, that means you'll probably get out of school just a couple days ahead of the rest of your Central Georgia counties. But we have a lot of stuff on the morning team that we're planning to go live for, some specific weather graphics. It's definitely a fun week and a half that we do have on the morning show, and we'll have you covered for all the weather that you need to know each and every day for those first couple days of school. Labor Day, going to go ahead and throw that on your radar. Don't really have any notable events in the month of August, but something that I personally am looking forward to, the start of college football, NFL preseason games, starting to get that football swing back heading into the fall months. But Labor Day weekend, that's actually going to be the official first weekend of college football. Maybe second official. We do have the week 0 thing now. Don't know why they do that, but week 1 will be Labor Day weekend. And Labor Day itself is on September 1st, which means plenty of college football games will start on the last couple of days of August. And meteorological wise, the peak of hurricane season, that officially occurs on September 10th. So that means that's kind of the halfway point and the time that we do have the most frequency of those areas of development, potential tropical systems. It takes a little bit for the Atlantic Ocean to warm up, but by the time we get into early September, the ocean is kind of at those peak temperatures, and that starts to fuel lots and lots of tropical activity. So we are going to see an uptick in tropical activity as we get into the next couple of months. But speaking of the names, I did mention that this potential area that we're watching for this weekend would claim the 3rd named storm of the 2025 hurricane season. Well, Tropical Storm Andrea was the first to get crossed off the list. Andrea formed in the North Atlantic Ocean. Textbook fish storm is what we like to call it. It didn't impact any land masses, probably stirred up some of the ocean currents, but it was very, very short-lived. As was Tropical Storm Barry, but Barry actually did have some implications on land. Barry moved over into the eastern coast of Mexico, a very dry desert terrain, so it could have resulted in some inland flooding and some landslides, but luckily haven't received many reports of that online and on social media. But Barry did weaken as it moved over land, number one, but a very dry land mass as well over in eastern Mexico. So if this area this weekend is supposed to get its act together, the third name that it would claim is Chantal. Yes, I know that looks like Chantal, but that is the correct pronunciation of it. We have a lot of these names that do have some different pronunciations from what they do look like they sound like. But overall, we have a list of 20 hurricane names on the Atlantic hurricane season list. And if we are to go all the way to the letter W and claim name Windy, then we have a supplemental list that will pop up, and that's just another list of about 20 names starting back at A, and we'll continue to go down that list until hurricane season ends. So speaking of that hurricane frequency, I told you about the peak on September 10th. That's when we see the most activity of hurricanes in this yellow shaded area, and then hurricanes and tropical storms in the red shaded area. Once again, you don't need to necessarily have a hurricane in order to feel the impacts of a tropical system. Maybe the winds aren't quite as gusty, not quite good, or not quite strong enough in order to reach hurricane criteria, but we've still seen our fair share of tropical storms do their fair share of damage and have many, many impacts, which actually I have another bit of a tangent. Sorry, I keep going off on random tangents during the stream, but we'll circle back to that once I get to some of the rainfall graphics. June 1st was when the season began, so right now we're heading into kind of the middle portion of July, I guess you could say, still at the very beginning of July. So we're somewhere right here before this July 10th timestamp. Still not too much frequency of activity. It's hovering around kind of the same values that you do see at the very beginning of tropical season and all the way back into May. Yes, we can get named storms forming a little bit earlier before the official start of hurricane season, but we will see an increase in activity all the way until September 10th, and then we will start to see the activity go down in nature. But we still can see some peaks, possibly even after that September date. Of course, Hurricane Helene last year at the very end of September, Hurricane Michael a couple years ago, the very beginning of October. So once we get into the later half of October, that's when we finally see this activity go down, and we start to finally see some activity pretty similar to what we're seeing right now. But in terms of what we're expecting, in terms of the forecast for your hurricane season, on average, we typically see 14 tropical systems. So that's going to be your named storms. That list of names I just showed you, we average, or on an average year, we typically see 14 of those. 7 of which can strengthen into hurricanes, which means you need winds that get up to about 73, 74 miles per hour. And of those hurricanes, we see 3 of them that classify as major on an average year, which is category 3 or higher. So let's take a look at what Colorado State forecasted. Well, they went above average, 17 named storms, 9 of which are hurricanes, and then 4 of which are those category 3 or larger hurricanes. And then the NOAA forecast is simply some range. The lower end of this range does fall below the average marks. However, most of the range does go above the average mark, closer to maybe 18, 19 named storms. That would be even above what Colorado State has forecasted. But it is forecasted to be an above average year, but not quite as active as we were last year. So I did say we were going to talk about some of the rainfall graphics. We transitioned into a new month, the month of July, which we have not recorded any rain so far in the month of July. So we started out near normal, and we've steadily creeped down to the dry category, believe it or not. However, this is just relative to the month of July. We haven't recorded any rainfall so far, and in years past, we've recorded a couple of inches of rain possibly. So the average so far at this point in the month of July is maybe around a ½ inch of rain, which I'll show you on the next graphic. But on average, we typically see nearly 5 inches of rain in July. So it's a pretty wet month of the calendar year. The record was back in 1994, 18.16 inches of rain. Now, if any of you can refresh your memory, what happened in 1994? That was Tropical Storm Alberto that caused the famous flood of '94. So that does make sense. I don't believe we'll get anywhere near this record. Fingers crossed and knock on some wood right there, because I did just say that. However, it would take a tropical system like Alberto to kind of sit over central Georgia for an extended period of time in order to reach rainfall totals anywhere near that vicinity. But obviously, it is a pretty infamous month in terms of rainfall for the month of July. So let's take a look at 2025 as a whole. The last 4 months in a row have all gone above average. March and April were barely above average, nearly about a ½ inch. But it did help us put a little bit of a dent in a very dry January and a very dry February, which added up to a little bit over 3 inches below average in terms of rainfall. Well, we definitely popped back up above average in the month of May. It was a pretty wet May, in fact, about 3.5 inches above where we normally see those totals for. And June was also yet another wet month, so nearly 4 inches above the average for the month of June. But so far in the month of July, we're hovering about a ½ inch below where we should be. Of course, we'll get some rain chances that are back over Middle Georgia Regional Airport. Some areas have seen rain so far in the month of July, but all of these numbers are at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. That's where we typically get our observations for the Macon area. So all in all, we're still hovering just over 4.5 inches above average. And I've been talking about this number, and yes, it does seem a little bit too high, but it gives us a cushion to go into a dry stretch, hopefully, that we have for this weekend, all the way into most of next week. And that number will still hover well above average, maybe not quite as high, but we do have a good cushion in order for staying above average in terms of where we should be at this point of the year for rainfall. And this is as of July 3rd, so we'll revisit this again after the 4th of July holiday, see if any rain chances were recorded at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. Actually, I told you we haven't recorded any rain in the month of July. We actually have recorded a trace, but a trace is a value so low it doesn't even equate to about 1/100th of an inch. So just a couple of drops maybe hitting the sensor down in South Bibb County. Here's a look at your drought monitor. Take a wild guess who is not in any form of dry conditions. That is not only central Georgia, the entire state of Georgia and many of our neighboring states. As we know, we've had our fair share of an active weather period. Lots of systems coming over from the west in Alabama. So many areas of Alabama do not find themselves in dry conditions either. This was recorded as of July 1st. They get released 2 days after every Thursday. So we'll get all of the data maybe from this past Wednesday and Thursday added into this drought monitor, which did actually this past Wednesday and Thursday were July 2nd and July 3rd. So we didn't record any rainfall chances. We may see some abnormally dry areas try to pop up if we do go through a very dry stretch, but overall that's nothing really to worry about. I'm sure many of the crops and many of your backyard gardens are still remaining well hydrated. So thanks for tuning in to your Weather Impact Extended Forecast. I hope you have a safe and a very fun 4th of July weekend. We'll revisit all of your extended forecast needs as we go into next Monday at 10:30. But until then, have a happy holiday, Central Georgia, and God bless America.